Azkuna zentroa Alondega Bilbaok ongi etorria ematen dizue Gutun Zuria Bilbao letren nazioarteko jaialdira. Ondoren, ROSA MONTERO idazle eta kazetariaren eta GEMMA RUIZ idazle eta kazetariaren arteko solasaldia izango da. Topaketa honetan, liburuaren munduan egindako ibilbideaz hitz egingo dute. Kazetaritza prestakuntzak eman dienaz. Mesedez, itzali telefono mugikorrak eta gozatu elkarrizketaz. Azkuna Zentroa Alondega Bilbao os da la bienvenida a Gutun Zuria Bilbao, Festival Internacional de las Letras. A continuación tendrá lugar la conversación titulada Escribir el mundo entre la escritora, periodista y Premio Nacional de las Letras 2017 Rosa Montero y la también escritora y periodista GEMMA RUIZ. En este encuentro hablarán de su trayectoria hacia el mundo del libro, de lo que su formación periodística ha aportado. Por favor, es el momento de apagar los teléfonos móviles y disfrutar de la conversación. Azkuna Zentroa Alondega Bilbao welcomes you to Gutun Zuria Bilbao International Literature Festival. Now we present the conversation Escribir el Mundo between the writer, journalist, winner of the 2017 National Prize of Literature, Rosa Montero, and the writer and journalist, GEMMA RUIZ. In this meeting, they will talk about their journey towards the world of books and about what their journalistic training has contributed. Please, it's time to turn off your mobile phones and enjoy the conversation.
¿Qué tal? ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué tal? Uy.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thanks very much, indeed. What an amazing auditorium and beautiful stage. It looks beautiful. I love this room. Apparently it's the first time they designed this stage in this way. I feel like Taylor Swift myself. Yeah, makes you want to dance. Well, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. And during some seconds, I'd like to make a personal comment. When I was 17 years old, studying journalism, had I been told back then that in 2024, at the end of the month of February, I would be in a literature festival together with Rosa Montero, I would have thought that was absolutely, crazy. So thanks very much, Rosa. What an honor, what a privilege. Thanks to the festival for inviting us to engage in this conversation, and thanks to my great grandma who inspired me to become a writer. So thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, joining us this afternoon. You talked about your great grandmother. Yes, and my first novel was based on some interviews I conducted during uni, and I interviewed someone who had undergone major technological and social changes. My mom told me, well, why don't you interview your great-grandmother who was born in a small village. She was the daughter of some peasants in El País. And then her family migrated to Sabadell, the city. And this is someone who raised my sisters and I. I never went to daycare. I was raised by my great-grandmother. So my mom told me, why don't you interview your great-grandmother? So that's what I did. At the age of 33, I revisited that recording. And then, based on that, I continued my inquiry, and I ended up writing a book. That's funny, that's striking. Well, at 17 years old, she was reading my work. Well, the age gap here is huge. Well, you're a role model. You inspired me. Well, you're much younger than me. And this country has changed a great deal, and the world as well. This is her first model. And the second novel is about two women, one from China. And the third novel is called Nuestras Madres, awarded with the San Jordi Award. 19 years after Karma Riera. And she's won this award with a very interesting ensemble novel that intertwines the stories of different women. 44 years ago, I published my first novel, Crónica del Desamor. This was the story that depicted the lives of a group of women. Earlier, behind the scenes, we were discussing this. They had asked me to write a book and feminist during the transition period. I was a freelancer, and of course I had no choice but to, do that assignment. They paid me 25,000 pesetas, and I myself was a bit bored of conducting interviews in some months. And I told the publisher, I'm bored with this project. I can return the down payment, or I can write a book, a chronicle, fiction book on women that portrays the transition period. I love that book. Well, it was very successful because it portrayed the Spain of the day. I titled it Chronicle because for me it wasn't really a novel. For me, my first real novel was my second novel. But it gave me a boost and a nudge. And had they labeled me feminist, I wouldn't have been able to, win any awards. And if you're a woman and you write a book with main characters, well, they label you in a very specific way. But back in the den, it was quite something. And they criticized me extensively because of what I had written. I was labeled feminist writer, but it's wonderful that 44 years later, my dear colleague has been distinguished with the San Jordi Award. And this means that we have made significant headway. But this is a road that we do not travel on our own, even though they, constantly try to destroy the work of some fellow writers. When I was 17, I would read you in the press because I identified with you. You were a role model for us. You need a role model. That's what also inspires you. And without that Crónica del Desamor, and I revisited your book some days ago, and it's a beautiful work of art. It's a new journalism reminiscent of Tom Wolfe, if I may say. And without that genealogy, without those predecessors, we wouldn't be here. We've traveled a road, and now we're combating the so-called niche literature. Here, we're discussing about writing and narrating the world, and existing in this world as a woman writer means that you've seen things that you wouldn't, dream about. Yes, there's still a great deal of sexism in society, but much headway has been done. Some experiments are being conducted these days that are demonstrating that, for example, when women go to visit the GP, well, there's a comparison between men and women that go and visit the GP showing the same symptoms, and men are referred to specialists to, receive subsequent tests, whereas women are prescribed painkillers. In Spain, in 2019, for women, it took 13% more time to be referred to physician, the GP, only prescribed painkillers. Most of the GPs in this country, are they women or men? They're women, but it's, it's very much set in stone. One of the organizers of the feminist conferences has studied the gender bias in medicine, and she told me that during med school they only taught menstruation during 30 minutes, and endometriosis is one of the more underdiagnosed illnesses. Yes, as you point out in your book, I've suffered a great deal when I menstruated, and it's something that we all had to bear with. Anyhow, going back to what you were saying earlier, which I find extremely interesting. I mean, sexism still exists, but we do have some role models. So that lack of role models was extremely difficult for women. I remember the case of Clara Schumann, an amazing composer, one of the most important musicians, a pianist. And Clara Schumann, in her diary, said, I almost, caressed that dream, the dream of being a composer. And it's true that some of her compositions were authored by her husband. And I thought at some point that I could become a composer, but then I thought, well, it's impossible. That's an impossible dream. No woman has been able to achieve that. There are so many different examples of amazing, extremely talented women. Among them, the creator of the so-called proto-operas. You're a pioneer, a trailblazer in women's stories. Luckily, these days, we have many, many essays that revisit the Claudia Schumann of all disciplines. If you scratch on the surface, you find amazing women across all disciplines. In 1991, when you published Historia de las Mujeres, you shed light on how history had neglected or sidelined these women. It's very important that we give a voice to women, that we rescue those women that have been forgotten. Antonella Rodrigo is someone that we need to quote. She's 20 years older than myself. Her work was published in very, very small publishing houses, and she was very scarcely read. When I published Historias de Mujeres, Stories of Women, I thought that there were many more than we thought that had struggled, that had fought hard, in spite of the fact that they couldn't go to university. I mean, women haven't been able to go to study at uni until 1911 in Spain, with the exception of some specific universities. In spite of the fact that they couldn't study, they couldn't work, there are many extraordinary cases. And the truth is that now there are many, many more. There's a scientist from Valencia, Madame Navajas, that is building a database with the EU funds that collects info on all women around the world. And they've always been women accomplishing a great deal across all disciplines, across all periods of time, in the Arab world, in the war front. There were conquerors, warriors, women warriors, and when we look back, we are here because some women in Africa back in the day decide to explore new horizons. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. It's as basic as that. And since we have you here with us, I come from a generation, I was born in 1975, And when you start, looking out to the world, well, you understand that feminism is no longer necessary. And in the 90s, nobody, introduced herself as a feminist. And I thought, well, there's something out there called feminism, but it's not something that I embraced back then. And people from my generation and myself have visited libraries to learn about other extraordinary women. But you've experienced a different context. And so I'd like to know who was the canary in the mine, who flagged this. GEMMA, what you just said is amazing, surprising. You're the first person that tells me that in the 90s, people committed and engaged like you thought that feminism did not exist. I'm from that generation that has lived this, naturally. It came with the territory for me. I didn't want to, hold the same position as my mom in society. My brother was treated differently than myself. I've always been very rational. And I was 6 or 7 years old, and I was very much frustrated by what I was said and by the different treatment. Everybody told me, you're going to get married. And I said, I will never get married. In the end, I ended marrying my husband, who was Sil. How did you experience that moment in time? I was born in 1951. I'm 73 years old already. And in my house, and I have a brother that is 5 years my senior. I was from Madrid, by the way. Other people from my generation would leave. I come from a very humble family. We didn't have hot water until I was, for example, 16 years old. It was during the university boom. Everyone went to university. That was, well, extraordinary. And I had some fellow friends from other cities who basically chose unis in Madrid because they wanted to leave their home. The fact that you leave your home to live on your own was very difficult to accept for women. So you would only leave your house in case you were gonna get married. Until you were 21, you weren't of legal age. When I was 21, I left. My brother left our home at 30 to get married. We all suffered a great deal during 2 or 3 years. I didn't speak a word with my dad. He was extraordinary, and thankfully we were able to make amends. And so there was no other way around it. You had to be a feminist. Otherwise you would die. So I was surprised by what you have said. Yes, but when you gain rights, when you achieve rights, well, there's a reaction, and we bore the brunt of the reaction of the 80s when people told us, no, you already have equality. But you accepted that? Yes, we accepted that foolish narrative. Yes, we did. And I was a journalist, and you were a journalist. I was 17, and in my school at uni, there was no feminist movement. Wasn't something we discussed. I always would say, no, we're all the same, we're all equal. So we, carry the weight of that alleged equality. So there was no reaction on our hind, and during some decades, we were like, shut up. We didn't react. Yes, that's funny. I think the last wave, the last feminist wave, the post-Me Too has been very, very important, yes. After the Me Too exploded, many men have come to realize that feminism is not just about women. We can only change society if we all engage, not just women, but women and men. We've changed society a great deal because they, men, have changed as well. Otherwise, it won't be possible. This has been a significant development. I remember that in the feminist demonstration of 2019 in Madrid, one of the most massive feminist demonstrations of history, 130,000 people according to RUIZ. We probably were many more. And that very moving and exciting demonstration, and 40% were men. And that was very reassuring. And much progress has been made. But now, there are some movements to, go back to previous times, and the progress of the far right is perhaps, destroying part of the progress that has been made. We're not all equal. We have some gentlemen out there saying that we feminists abuse them and they feel like the oppressed gender. I have some questions for you, and I have questions for you as well. Well, let's leave that for a bit later on. I have a stingy question for you. I, at work at Televisión de Cataluña, I've been training the newsroom with the support of experts. I've trained them in gender perspective or in anti-fascist journalism, but you're also a pioneer, not only in discussing gender roles, but in applying gender perspectives when you wear both hats, both when you work as journalist and as a writer. You narrate the world from the position from which you want to change it. I find that extremely interesting. That journalism and that literature with that perspective, where does it feed from? Where did you find your inspiration? Well, journalism, written journalism, is a literary genre. You've done a great deal of visual journalism. Yes, TV chronicles. It can even be cinematic art. But written journalism, which is what I do, is a literary genre. And it can be, for example, Cold Blood by Truman Capote is a good example. And journalism has to abide by some rules. You can decide to do utilitarian journalism. In journalism, clarity is a value, is an asset. The clearer news article, the better. Whereas in narrative, in the lack of clarity, the nuances is better. In journalists, you talk about what you know, you document yourself, you conduct interviews to digest the information. Whereas in novels, you create from the unconscious. And in journalism, you're a tree that talks about the surrounding trees, whereas in a novel, you're an eagle that tries to describe the world below your wings. I've lived through the transition, and I believe that the press has played a very important role during the Spanish transition. And I, together with my fellow colleagues, have made an effort to try to change this country. I chose a specific, topic to cover in an article to try to contribute to change. But a novel cannot be utilitarian. I mean, you write a novel because you're looking for meaning in life. An initiation journey cannot be written based on previously defined questions. Well, novels choose me, I don't choose them. I'm haunted by an image that moves me. And novels portray who you are. For example, Tolstoy. Tolstoy was a monstrous machist. Well, really? First time I hear that. Well, Gorky said that he was even worse than that. He was a true misogynist who hated women. And then he wrote Anna Karenina, and he wanted to write Anna Karenina to portray how progress destroyed the great Russia, and he depicted progress in a negative light. He was pretty backward thinking. And he said that progress was so bad that women can become adulterous, and that's why Anna Karenina at the end, and I'm spoiling this novel, decided to jump into, rail tracks. Railway was the symbol of progress. His novel is a matches, but since he was a genius, that novel was published, and sometimes novels follow a different path, and that other path is very, very important. It's like the collective or group dreams. Writers, what they do is explore the collective dreams of society and wants to portray and put into writing the dreams and the nightmares of people. I mean, novels aren't thought to change the immediate world, but novels rather help us, get to understand each other better. And that journalism training of exploring and investigating, that's something that you have also applied in your books. But do you look for novels, or do they find you? No, it's true that those topics, find me, but I work from rage. I don't know whether that's good or bad. Well, I think you'll overcome this. Don't worry. I'm on it. But that's creative engine for me, a driver. That I feel that frustration about what I don't know and that I believe I need to learn. Sometimes I have this urge of understanding myself, on shedding light on darkness, and that feeling is what ends up, taking the form of a novel. Well, those strong feelings at the end of the day, are what make you engage. Well, these are like the spark, the nudge. I think that when you cry, you write terrible novels. When you perhaps crying, you write a good diary, but not a novel. No, I feel this rage that gets me want to hit people, not cry. I truly believe that one needs to erase himself and herself in order to be a novelist. Yes, you need to erase yourself. Well, I'd rather read than write. Writing takes so much effort that unless there's something that really truly motivates me, I won't sit down and write, because it's extremely challenging and difficult. I need to be haunted and moved. But once I'm on it, I'm writing. That's when I start, enjoying the process. That's when the words start flowing. And that's when my rage is appeased. And I become ethereal. Yes. And when I read your books, I can feel that emotion. But sometimes I think, why am I going to lock myself up during so many days instead of going out for a drink with my friends? I need to, I will only do that if it's something that I truly care about. But there's a feeling, there's an emotion, there's an image, something that prompts you, something that you don't understand, you grasp, but that moves you so much that you want to share it with others. But that feeling, that an emotion isn't rage. Because vengeance, that traps you. Some people write books. How do you call them? You know, secret books. There's a long-standing tradition of vengeance or revenge books. Well, perhaps I write one myself. No, those are shitty books. Crap. Okay. And documentation and research. You enjoy that process, don't you? Well, yes and no. I want to know. Sorry, I'm being tortured by this hearing. Yes, I have this urge of knowing, understanding what happened. But for me, a novel represents a journey towards others, towards the different characters, big or small. And those characters tell me the story. And then we have the documentation process. But you need to be careful with documentation. Documentation can kill novels, can crash them. All my novels, for example, there's one called Historia del Rey Transparente, set in the 12th century. And one may think that there's a great deal of documentation behind. But it's not that I decided to write a 12th century story, start documenting myself. I love history, I love Middle Age history, and during many years I've been reading a great deal. For those of us that read, sometimes we, get a bit obsessed with a topic and we explore it. And I have this image of a plot of land, a group of peasants, and a group of 2 or 3 people, plowing the land without animals, exhausted at very high temperatures. And in the neighboring plot, we have 400 warriors killing each other. Did you dream this? No, I was daydreaming. No, I have this kind of daydreams constantly. Well, that's amazing. Well, if you have to spare, well, share with me some of your visions, some of those images that come to your mind. Well, I knew it was a medieval story because those 400 warriors were using medieval weapons. Perhaps you find this normal, but having a vision with such level of accuracy, 400 warriors or 396 dressed, and yes, I could even consider the armor and the weapons they were using. These are dreams that you dream with your eyes open. I can see those images. And this is something that I also studied in my latest book, El peligro de estar cuerda. The danger of being sane. My mind hasn't yet matured. Am I serious? And you're laughing out there. Yours hasn't matured as well.
Ya vamos a ver el.
Well, I know about this because I love neurology, because it takes a lot to the human brain to mature, not until you are 30-something. So one of the periods of maturation that is very important, the most important one, happens in your early puberty. Up until children are just hyper-connected. All the synapses in the brain, all these neuronal links are there like in a sort of brainstorming mode. This is why children, they made up stories. They see a dog passing by and they take it for a dragon. I mean, children, sometimes how they behave, if they were adults, we would consider they are psychopaths because they are talking to somebody that is not there. So that will be a psychotic delirium if they were adults. So they're talking to nobody, somebody that is not there. So when you are mature, then these parts of your brains that are no longer useful, then they die, and they all these synapses, they change, so they focus, your brain focuses on hunting dinosaurs, searching for a couple in order to reproduce yourself and take care of your babies. There's some 20% of the population, we skip that period where these happen to your synapses, and then you have a 20% that are people who have psycho issues, and then some other 20% are people that are creative. And many of you might be in this situation because of the 30, that people that need to read, to live, we have that kind of a brain, that kind of a parallel brain. So I am constantly sort of seeing things sort of dawn on me constantly. Well, it doesn't happen to me, says GEMMA. Well, then you are not this type. Well, my mental soup is more about words. I think of words that is not as sexy as saying I am seeing like 400 guys wearing an armor. Well, no. The thing is, maybe is that your synapses were not properly sort of cut at the time, and then maybe in that part of your brain you build these towers of words. Well, anyway, I constantly see images come into my brain, and most of them, they're useless to me, so I am expecting for a lift. And then one day when the doors are about to open, then I see it. I see there's going to be a dead body there full of blood when the doors of the lift or an elevator opens. And it happens every day, and I see no corpses, but that's what comes to my mind. You've got many of these type of images constantly. Do you write them down? No, because most of them are useless. But suddenly one of those images is so powerful, so moving, and then you get to be so curious, and then you have to get to know more about that. You find it so beautiful. It goes through you, and it's like there is the meaning of the world for you. It's so big, you cannot keep it in your body or in your brain, and then you say, I've got to talk about this, I've got to share it, and then there is the seed for a tale or a novel. And it's very nice because from the very beginning of the creation you have the reader, and in every kind of art, we're talking about communication, there is this need for communication. Well, you cannot keep it for yourself. Gemma says yes, you also have these impulses. Yes, as we were saying, I think this is a big effort, so this cannot be really a hobby, because sometimes it's a pain, but there's also passion behind it. You know what happened to me once? Let's see what you think of this. Since you are an expert in neurology, I was writing, and during some seconds, I saw myself from above, and I saw my head working. So I saw the image of what I was doing, and those were like words fighting to produce that scene. And for a moment I saw myself as if I was in a deep meditation, and it was a very short moment. For once in my life I saw me from above and how my brain works. Well, this is a brain connected in a different way, ROSA says. Well, now I'm more relieved, because I've got to give you something amazing, interesting, because I never see things like you do. Well, there are different ways. I mean, not everybody, but many brains are connected in this way, and these that really make of you a good actress. You might be a bad artist, a poor actress. It's only that your synapses were pruned in a different way, and I'm very much a Darwinist. So if there is such a high percentage of people where synapses are not duly pruned, and then these constantly happens in our species, then I guess this might indicate that this is good for something. I've read a science fiction by Van Gogh many years ago, and The book was like the last cosmic trip. It was a shuttle traveling through the universe, and that there was a society of experts. They were all like Einsteins, all male. I don't know what women were doing in that novel. Maybe they were doing some omelets, but I don't know really. This is dates back from some 60 years ago, and then I read it later on, and they were all super experts, super wise men, all but one. And the other, it was called the Nexalist. That is the one that knew about nothing, only a little about everything. And so he was like the link in between everybody. He was like a pariah. And well, this is like what we are, journalists, says Gemma. And so he was really rejected by everybody else up until the shuttle breaks down. And who will save them if the engine breaks down? Him, because he was the only one that would be able to do something about it. Well, that is like journalists, says him. We know a bit of everything, and we're good when we do things properly. So how did you, did you want from the start to be a journalist? Yes, but when you're 17 and you've got all this daydreaming, you do all this daydreaming. When did you start writing? Quite late. I would write my chronicles, but you said you liked writing, just but I didn't write. So how did you know you liked writing? Because I loved reading. You know why I knew? Because I would read and rewrite in my brain. But I never sort of even wrote small poems, like the typical poems in Catalonia, in the Catalan country. But when I would read, I would rewrite in my mind, and I loved theater and culture, so it was like an intuition for me. So when you wrote your first fiction piece? About my great-grandmother. The first thing I published is when I was 40. Well, not publishing is something else, but writing. I finished it when I was 40. And you never thought of being a writer? No, I would do my chronicles for TV. Well, to me, as you talk about images, I would never really be good in the visual, because in my chronicles, to me, it's always more important words than images. Sometimes a colleague of mine says, well, I made this panoramic picture, and then I go like, well, to hell with it, I'm going to cut it into pieces. So to me, the important thing are words. So I was very happy about these very short chronicles that I write. It's like 1 minute 45 seconds. So that was a way for me to channel my creativity. And so when you wrote, did you sort of fall in love with it? Well, first I was doing like this journalistic chronicle, then I started with interviews. Then in summer, once I found this voice, that was the narrative voice, that was not the one of a journalist. So I could make up characters, and I just fell in love with it. Then I found another profession. But you could do both from the very beginning. And Rosa says no to me. I think most of us, we started when we were children. Maybe you did not allow yourself to do it. I was very much like into a performance kind of thing. I would do my storytelling orally. That's interesting. Well, maybe there is a relationship there, because I would stutter. I had issues to speak properly. I could never do public speaking until I was at like 40. I was the other way around. For me, oral exams were terrible because I would stutter. No, I would be in my school, and I would be publicly sort of explaining the things to all my fellow pupils. No, I would write since I was very young. When I was a young girl, I read an interview by J.K. Rowling, and she said in the interview that she wrote the first interview when she was 6, and it was about a rabbit that would be talking. And I think I also wrote, my mom said when I was very young, about a little rat that talks. And we all talk about talking rodents in our first writings. Yes, we didn't really pay attention to the indications because we had to leave some 10 minutes for the audience. No, I am right. We get to the countdown here. When we get to 0, then it is 10 more minutes for the audience. I am right. This is our time. So we still have 6 minutes to go, 6.12.11.10. Something else that is interesting that I wanted to mention is that when I was working as a journalist for El País, they asked me to be the general manager of the weekly magazine, and I took it because El País was very successful at the time, and then many new journalists became stars. So even my friends would tell me what I had to do to stay there, to keep on being a star. Yes, everybody went crazy. I was really anxious about it. So I thought, okay, so I will no longer write. I will be the manager director of this magazine, and they will forget about me. But they didn't forget about me, because then you realize you're in another position, and that is also very useful. So that was of the reasons of my acceptance. And then the other reason being because female, most women, we would not want to be in a position of power. We all have this complex of being a fake, and I didn't like this kind of role of executive or managing a journalist. But you have to say yes, and you have to try it. Yeah, I would write cultural chronicles for years. Well, we're criticizing all these different role models, but I was told by my chiefs, where you're going to be the editor-in-chief. And I thought, yes, so since I was 21, I wanted to do this, and sometimes they pay attention to me, sometimes they don't, but now I can do this. So I thought, okay, I can do some sort of theory about genre or female violence against violence against female, and I wanted to sort of teach about this, and I wanted to give this new approach, and I am very happy about this and about the team that I created at the time. So I said yes, and I didn't feel like an intruder, because I always felt okay with it. It's also because I come from this family in the country. My grandfather would tell me, before anybody tells you anything, you start by throwing a stone at them. Just keep something in your hand. So this is why being editor-in-chief was okay for me. And whenever there are meetings, I always speak out my mind, even against most men there. But it is okay, they already know me. Yes, but that was something that we got to do after hard work. Yes, because, there is this glass ceiling. And at the time, to some women journalists, they were offered these positions and they didn't want them. Yes, it's quite, it's really a hard task. And sometimes some colleagues of mine say we should not be everywhere, but we should be in some of the strategic positions. When we are on command, things change. When we talk about these genre perspective. There's always the debate about when people are allegedly innocent, so you cannot, what it really means is you're not going to believe in those people that are now sort of vindicating or claiming they've been assaulted or so. Well, but when we get organized and when in the managing board the previous day, when there's going to be a meeting of the managing board, and the previous day we sort of got together the women and we said, like, we're going to do this or that, and we knew what we had to do, and we will be living there, the men, like, you've got nothing else to add to this. Yeah, any minority in a certain percentage within a crowd. So if the minority is below 5%, then they have to adapt to the majority. But when they grow beyond 5%, then they start being able to act and to change things. Okay, so I think we can give the floor to the audience. Great, now we see them. I'm going to take a picture. When I used to present the Sitges Film Festival, some of the directors, they would take a picture with the audience behind it because they wanted to say it like they're able to sold out. So we're going to take a picture, we're going to take a selfie. So what would you like to know? Fire out. Now is when everybody starts looking down. Come on, fire out. Break the ice. You can also share your stories with us.
Una mano, por aquí alzada.
Aquí hay una mano, aquí delante de una valiente.
Hola.
¿Qué tal?
Pues muy bien, estupendamente.
Hi, how are you doing? Well, I'm fine here listening to you and to all the interesting things you're sharing with us. You previously talked about this sort of hyperactive brain some years ago. I read your book, The Loca de la Casa, The Crazy One in the House, and I loved it. To me, it was like an eye-opening book. I never thought about all those things we have sort of cooking in our heads. Maybe this is related to what you said. This also makes me think that maybe all the things that come to our mind, we are sort of afraid of expressing it, of sharing it. And then we sort of put a lid on top of it, not to seem to be too crazy. Well, the important thing is that you are a sister, because you have the same kind of a brain, I guess. I said there are many people with this type of brains. Well, I think the incredible thing is, and I talk about it in my book, The Incredible Mystery of being not being crazy, is that most of us, most human beings, try not to show their differences because we try to be normal. It seems like whatever is not normal is not useful, but that is not true. I mean, normality comes from what is normal, from what is standard, and that it changes according to times, to societies, to countries. And this is also said by Yale University in the United States. In 2018, they published a study, an essay saying that there's nothing like normality. Normality is just the average of the stand of most human beings in front of a certain subject matter. So it is impossible that one single man or male will agree with this average in everything. So we're all different in some aspect. The different, the abnormal is not being weird. So all of us, we are more or less weird. We're all different somehow. What happens is that we try not to show it. We repress that difference that is not pathological, not to be rejected, she says. Yes, because when a child at a school shows that they're very different to the average or to the standard, then, he or she goes through a hard time. So when you repress that's different, even if it's not a pathological one, then there are mental illnesses. That is something else. I suffer mental illness, and I had panic attacks since I was a teenager up until I was almost 40, and then there are very severe psychosis. We're not talking about that. We're saying that a difference is not, being different is not pathological, and people keep it so much to themselves that then you get to a clinical repression. They do not even know what they are repressing or who they are, and there is a terrific social pain. We could change these in a very simple way, yes, by sort of making all this that is different in each of us sort of come up to surface. Well, I think when you are a journalist, we are not always fully presenting the difference. We always talk about the same time of behaviors and bodies. So also I think with fiction we can contribute to what you are saying, but you do not contribute to it if you sort of consider it. In essays you do, in journalism you do. But if I think about what you've just explained, maybe that will stay in my brain, and then I will sort of produce a character using this. Yes, in my novels there are many people that have mental illnesses, but it's okay. This is how I see the world. But I don't look for it. That's how I see it. Yes, but it's a certain degree of responsibility in diversifying. Yes, in life, but not in your novel. I'm so much against directing your novels, because then you ruin the role that a novel should play. That is like a constant pure search of the meaning of existence. But if you do that search with this information in mind, then you will get to a different place, I guess. So I guess it is good to have this as a starting point, this other vision of things, because otherwise everything is going to take you that we have to be normal. Yes, but the main change starts, or the first change starts by you, by saying you can behave in a different way, because we always point out those that are different. This is the country in the world where we take more tranquilizers. And I think there are two things combined for this. So we had a super good health system, but it's been dismantled. So everybody could go to their family doctor, but we have, in the field of psychology, we have the lowest amount. So people suffer a lot. They have the psychological pain, so they go to the family doctor, and then the family doctor, they can transfer you to an expert, to a psychiatrist, because there is a long waiting list. So we are the society that are taking more tranquilizers. So many of you might be taking these tranquilizers, and nobody talks about this. And we should speak out. We should talk about this. It's important to take all this out to the surface. Okay, we could keep on talking about this first question. We still have time for another question. This lady in red.
A ver, yo quería preguntaros que
I have a question for you. You live in the world of journalism, writers, but the younger generations, 40 years old, I'm talking about them because I have, daughters that age. It's true that we've broken the glass ceiling, but sometimes they're putting their lives at risk and they have stopped reading. I've read many of your books. I forgot the titles, but I've read them. And when my daughters come home, they ask me, Mom, have you read all of that? I don't have time to read. And it's really a pity that people, are not reading these days. And I think this, not reading compounded with the social media and AI, honestly, will this translate into, an absence of writers and journalists in the future? The 40 years old, the people from my generation and that are not reading aren't reading because this is like what happens with caregivers. Women and the women in the couple, bear the brunt of most of the, chores. My friends with younger children read less. At 20, I would go more to clubs than read. Well, I'd like to share with you a positive thought. Literature has always been a minority movement, and that minority has grown and grown. When people say young people don't read, well, the truth is they read more and more. 8 or 9 years ago, that growing trend registered a full. I attended a conference in Mexico where they tried to explain why that curve was a downward curve. Was it because of Netflix? No, it's because of the smartphone that eats up, 5 hours for a day. But, well, it's true that the pandemic has reversed this trend, and we see that there's a growing trend in reading again. So I'd like to finish with this positive note. We're here in a literature festival that celebrates literature, and I think that's the perfect way of wrapping up. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen.